Well, of course, the Prime Minister under huge pressure to scrap the third and the last stage of the tax cuts that the Morrison government passed 3 years ago, which Labor promised grudgingly to honour at the last election. Now, the first two stages were tax offsets for the poor, several in a row actually, and tax cuts mostly for the low and middle income earners. Richer Australians, by which I actually mean people on more than 90,000, real fat cats, they were promised their tax cuts, the main ones in 2024. So they've still got 2 years to wait. Meanwhile, bracket creep. But those cuts are going to cost $250 million, which critics say the country, well, they don't have that money. Times have changed, and why give a tax cut to the rich? Well, the Prime Minister yesterday says he has no plans to scrap these cuts, but he did point out the costs. It sounded like, oh, God, if you could think of a good reason, he'd get rid of them. Joining me is the country's top finance writer, Terry McCrann of the Herald Sun. Terry McCrann, I wish I could share this list with you. I don't know whether you've seen it, people going to the Jobs Summit.
I haven't.
I tell you what a stitch up. Oh, mate, you wait till you see it tomorrow. But the tax cuts, should the Albanese government scrap them?
Short answer, Andrew, no, because they are critical to getting a rational, sensible tax system. And the key element in this is getting a 30% tax rate which applies across a much broader spectrum of the workforce and indeed the income stream. This is critical to getting sensible incentives operating the tax system. And as you said, bracket creep. Bracket creep when inflation was 2 to 3% a year wasn't such a big deal, but it was there in inexorably taking more of your income in tax. But now that we've got inflation more like 5 to 10%, and we don't know for how long we're going to have that sort of level of inflation, you don't have bracket creep, you have bracket galloping. And that's why it's so fundamentally important to get most Australians on a 30% marginal tax rate, so that at least that will be reduced rather than in the 43, 46 and 48% tax brackets.
But then we said, well, times have changed, we can't even afford them.
Well, we can afford them, Andrew, because they're part of the structure of making the economy work more effectively, creating more jobs, creating more tax revenues. So yes, you might look at it simplistically about how much they will cost, quote unquote, at a moment in time once you cut those tax rates. But the whole point of having lower taxes, and we see this not only in the personal tax space but the corporate tax space, is to actually generate more tax revenue over time, more sustainable tax revenue, and more tax revenue when you have a healthier economy and you have rising living standards. So any suggestion that the tax cuts are not delivered, I don't even like that term cut. Tax reform is much more appropriate in this context, because as you say, it was part of a package. First tranche, number one, number two, number three. And not delivering the third tranche is not only a betrayal of those taxpayers and indeed the election promises, but it would be fundamentally negative for the economy going forward.
Yeah, and also it would be like it's a cheat's way of doing things. We'll promise the rich they'll get, or the richer. I mean, $90,000 is not rich. We'll promise you down the track when what you really mean is you'll never get it. But then people say, look, tax cuts for the rich when so many people are doing it so tough, they're unfair. Are they unfair?
Well, again, Andrew, no, because the higher income earners, let's use that term rather than the rich, are already paying much higher proportions of their income in tax. If you earn up to about $55,000, because of the way the rebate system works, you pay zero tax. You pay GST. Everybody pays GST, obviously, but in terms of income tax, the tax system is very heavily weighted already to low income earners. Very low tax rates, zero tax rates up to 55,000 with rebates, and then very low taxes up to 90,000 and to 100,000. It's those people earning between 100,000 and 300,000 that are actually paying the great bulk of taxes in Australia, and they are the ones that are keeping the system working, keeping the revenues of government working, and so. The idea that they are being excessively benefited by delivering that third tranche is ridiculous. And yes, I mean, people earning more than 300,000, more than $1 million will also get a benefit. But again, they are already paying up to 50% of their incomes, their total incomes in tax. So this is about sensible reform, Andrew, and it's about fair reform. And it really, any suggestion that we can't afford it, we need to backtrack, would be self-destructive.
Well, let's see where that idea goes. Terry McCrann, thank you so much for your time.